A black Cadillac Escalade sat sideways across my driveway gate, like it owned the ground beneath it. Engine running, windows tinted so dark they looked like bruises on the October air. I pulled up in my Honda Civic just after 4 in the afternoon, still thinking about the leftover pasta I was going to heat up for dinner, and my whole body went cold before my brain caught up. I parked on the street, got out slowly. 2 men stepped from the front doors of the Cadillac. Big, tailored suits that cost more than my rent. One cracked his knuckles like he was warming up for something. They positioned themselves between me and my own front door, shoulder to shoulder, a human wall. Then the rear door opened and my sister Vanessa stepped out. She was wearing white, not just any white, my white. The exact wedding dress I had tried on 6 days ago at the bridal boutique on Newberry Street, the one with the lace sleeves and the low back that made me cry when I saw myself in the mirror. My dress, on my sister's body, standing in my driveway. And from the other side of the Cadillac, Daniel Moretti unfolded himself into the daylight and placed his hand on my sister's waist like she had always belonged there. Like I was the stranger. Vanessa looked at me and smiled. Not warm, not cruel, just certain. "You've always lived for me, Kayla. This time, I'm just taking back what's mine." I stood there on the sidewalk in front of my own house in Brookline, Massachusetts, holding my work bag and a half-empty coffee cup, and I watched my fiancé wrap his arm around my sister like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. Daniel looked at me the way you look at a line item on a budget sheet that didn't perform. No anger, no guilt, just a man crossing something off a list. "The engagement is over, Kayla," he said. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "I've had my attorneys begin the process. The ring, the apartment, the joint accounts. Everything will be handled. I'd prefer this to be civilized." Civilized. The word landed like a slap dressed up in a silk glove. I looked at Vanessa. She was standing tall, chin lifted, one hand resting on Daniel's chest. And that's when I saw them. The pearl earrings. Small, luminous, slightly uneven because they were antique. My grandmother's pearl earrings. Grandma Elaine left them to me specifically in her will, not to Vanessa, not to my mother. To me. The only thing anyone in my family had ever given me that wasn't a hand-me-down or an afterthought. Vanessa was wearing them like they were costume jewelry she'd picked up at a department store. She'd been inside my house. She'd gone through my jewelry box. She'd taken them and put them on before coming here to stand on my doorstep with my fiancé and tell me she was taking what was hers. Daniel gestured to the 2 men flanking my door. "I want this to go smoothly. No scenes, no calls. My legal team will be in touch about the details." The bigger one, the one with the knuckles, spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, practiced. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, ma'am." The way he said it, like he'd said it before, like there was a script and I was just the latest woman to hear it. Vanessa adjusted the dress at the waist and glanced at Daniel like she was waiting for approval. He gave her a small nod. She turned back to me. "You should thank me, Kayla. I saved you from finding out the hard way." Then she got back in the Cadillac. Daniel followed. The 2 men climbed into the front seats. The doors closed. The engine revved once and the car pulled away from my gate, turned left at the end of the block, and disappeared behind the row of oak trees that lined Walnut Hill Road. Vanessa did not look back. None of them did. I stood in my driveway holding a cold cup of coffee and listened to the October wind push dead leaves across the pavement. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I was not going to cry in my own driveway. Not for them. Not for any of them. I looked down at the engagement ring still on my finger. A 4-carat diamond that Daniel had presented to me on one knee at the Liberty Hotel 8 weeks ago, while a string quartet played, and the waitstaff pretended not to watch. I pulled it off slowly and held it in my open palm. It caught the last of the afternoon light. $1.8 million. That's what the lawyers would tell me it was worth when they called in 72 hours demanding its return. I set the ring on the concrete step of my front porch, right next to the welcome mat that said, "Home," in cursive letters. Then I walked inside. The house felt wrong immediately. Not ransacked, surgical. Half the bedroom closet was empty, but the hangers were still evenly spaced, like someone had removed every third item over the course of weeks, so the gaps wouldn't be obvious. The bathroom cabinet was cleaned out. My anxiety medication, my backup glasses. My passport was gone from the desk drawer. The external hard drive where I kept personal files, family photos, tax records, gone. Clothes and jewelry I could understand. Vanessa's pettiness had always had a theatrical quality, a flair for the symbolic. But a passport and a hard drive. That wasn't petty. That was strategic. Someone had been in this house multiple times, removing things piece by piece, and I had never noticed because I trusted the people who had keys. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence do what silence does when the noise finally stops. It showed me everything I'd missed. The dress fitting was 6 days ago. Vanessa came with me. She helped me zip up the back. She stood behind me in the mirror and said, "You look beautiful, Kay." She called me Kay, the nickname she used when we were kids sharing a bedroom in our parents' house in Newton, back when I still believed she was my best friend. 6 days ago she zipped up my wedding dress and told me I was beautiful. And the whole time she was already wearing Daniel's ring in private. She'd been sleeping with my fiancé for over a year, and she'd stood behind me in that mirror with steady hands and a smile that never flickered. I picked up my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother, Diane. 1 text message. "Vanessa told us everything. Please don't make this ugly, Kayla. Daniel is a good man. Think about the family." 3 missed calls, and not a single one of them was to ask if I was okay. Not one. Think about the family. That phrase had been the background music of my entire life. Think about the family when I gave up my full scholarship to MIT so my parents could redirect the tuition money to help Vanessa attend BU. Think about the family when I co-signed Vanessa's first business loan at 24 and watched her default on it 8 months later while I kept making the payments. Think about the family when Vanessa borrowed $12,000 for an emergency that turned out to be a down payment on a convertible she crashed 3 months later. Think about the family. Always think about the family. Never think about Kayla. 3 months earlier, I still believed I was the luckiest woman in Boston. I need you to understand that, because what comes next doesn't make sense unless you know how completely I believed the lie. My name is Kayla Bennett. I was 32 years old that summer. I worked as a senior cybersecurity engineer at Meridian Defense Systems, a mid-sized defense contractor headquartered in Boston's Seaport District. I was part of a team building a classified encryption system for a Department of Defense contract worth $2.3 billion. The work was intense, technical, and exactly the kind of thing I was built for. I'd been good at systems my whole life, finding patterns, identifying vulnerabilities, building walls that kept the wrong people out. I just never thought to build those walls around my own heart. Daniel Moretti appeared in my life at a charity gala in July, 2 years before the Cadillac showed up at my gate. I didn't want to go to that gala. I hate galas. I hate small talk and canapes and shoes that pinch. But Vanessa insisted. She was working at a financial fund at the time and said it would be good for both of us to be seen. She drove us there. She picked out my dress. She walked me to a table near the back of the ballroom and introduced me to a man in a charcoal suit with silver at his temples and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "Kayla, this is Daniel Moretti. Daniel, this is my little sister, the genius I'm always telling you about." Then Vanessa disappeared for 20 minutes. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Vanessa always disappeared at parties. She'd find someone more interesting to talk to, someone with a bigger name or a thicker wallet, and she'd drift. That was just Vanessa. But now, sitting in my half-empty house with my passport missing and my sister's perfume still lingering in the closet she'd raided, that 20-minute absence looked different. She didn't drift. She delivered me. She walked me to Daniel's table, made the introduction, and left the room so he could work. Daniel pursued me for 5 months before I agreed to a real date. I wasn't playing hard to get. I genuinely didn't trust it. Men like Daniel Moretti didn't chase women like me. I was not glamorous. I was not connected. I was a cybersecurity engineer who spent her weekends reading technical journals and her evenings debugging code. But Daniel was patient. Flowers arrived at my office every Friday. Handwritten letters, not emails, actual letters on heavy cream paper, arrived at my apartment. He remembered everything I said. My favorite author. The name of the dog I had when I was 11. The fact that I drank my coffee black with 1 sugar, never 2. It felt like being seen for the first time in my life by someone who wasn't obligated to look. He proposed 8 weeks before the Cadillac. A private dinner at the Liberty Hotel, a string quartet, a 3-carat diamond ring that caught the candlelight and scattered it across the ceiling like stars. He got on one knee and said, "I've never met anyone like you. You're the only real thing in my life." I cried. I said yes before he finished the sentence. For the first time in 32 years, I believed someone had chosen me. Not because I was useful, not because I was reliable, not because I would sacrifice without complaining, just because I was me. The wedding planning started immediately, and Daniel took over most of it. 300 guests, a venue at the Boston Harbor Hotel, a designer dress, caterers, florists, a 15-piece band. I wanted something small. He wanted something enormous. He won every negotiation with the same warm smile and the same 5 words, "Trust me, I know best." I let him design the whole thing because I'd spent my whole life watching other people take the lead, and I thought that's what love looked like. I understand now. He wasn't planning a wedding, he was building a stage. And I was never the bride, I was the prop. Night had fallen by the time I stopped sitting on my bed and started moving again. The engagement ring was still on the front step where I'd left it. I could see it through the window, catching the porch light, a tiny star sitting on concrete. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. A woman's voice. Clipped. Professional. No warmth. "Ms. Bennett? My name is Jocelyn Park. I'm an attorney representing Moretti Holdings. I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Moretti has initiated proceedings to recover the engagement ring, valued at $1.8 million. You have 72 hours to return it to our offices. Failure to comply will result in civil litigation." She hung up before I could respond. 72 hours. They weren't even giving me a full night to grieve before the lawyers circled. This wasn't a breakup. This was a demolition. And every charge had been set long before I heard the first explosion. I set the phone down and opened my laptop. The screen lit up my face in the dark room. I am a woman who builds security systems for a living. I design walls that protect classified information from the most sophisticated threats on Earth. I find the cracks that other people miss. I trace the footprints that other people erase. Daniel Moretti picked me because I had access to secrets. He spent 2 years convincing me I was loved so he could get close to the most sensitive project in my company. He never once considered that the woman he chose as a target spent 10 years learning how to find the truth that powerful people try hardest to hide. He picked me because of what I could give him. He never stopped to think about what I could do to him. I showed up at Meridian Defense Systems at 7:45 the next morning because I didn't know what else to do. My badge had worked at the parking garage gate every day for 6 years. I'd swiped it so many times the plastic was wearing thin at the corner where my thumb pressed. I walked through the main entrance, nodded at the security guard, Gerald, who'd been there longer than me, and headed for the elevator bank. My badge didn't beep. The turnstile didn't move. I swiped again. Nothing. Gerald looked at his screen, then at me, and his face did something I'd never seen before. It folded, like he was watching someone walk into a glass door and couldn't warn them in time. "Ms. Bennett, I need you to wait here for a moment." He picked up the phone. I stood in the lobby of the building where I'd spent 6 years of my life, where I'd designed encryption architecture that protected classified military communications, where I'd worked through weekends and holidays and the flu and a kidney infection because the work mattered and I was good at it, and I waited like a visitor. like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong. Howard Langford came down personally, my direct supervisor. 53 years old, silver-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who wore the same 3 ties in rotation and thought it made him approachable. He'd mentored me since my first week. He'd recommended me for the Project Sentinel team. He'd told me once, over late-night takeout in the office during a deadline crunch, that I was the best engineer he'd ever managed. Howard didn't meet my eyes in the lobby. He walked me to a conference room on the 2nd floor, the one with no windows that we used for classified briefings, and closed the door behind us. "Kayla, we need to talk." He sat across from me and placed a folder on the table. Inside were printouts of system access logs. My name, my employee ID, timestamps showing logins to the Project Sentinel database at 2:14 in the morning, 3:47 in the morning, 1:22 in the morning, dates spanning the last 8 months. These logs show unauthorized access to classified project files from your credentials during off hours, Howard said. His voice was flat, professional, like he was reading from a script someone else had written for him. "The security team flagged it last week. We've conducted a preliminary internal review. Kayla, you're being placed on immediate suspension pending a full investigation into potential unauthorized disclosure of classified defense information." The words didn't register at first. They bounced off the surface of my brain like stones skipping on water. Unauthorized disclosure, suspension. I looked at the timestamps again. 2:14 in the morning, 3:47, 1:22. Those were nights I'd stayed at Daniel's penthouse in Back Bay. Nights I'd fallen asleep in his bed while he told me he loved me and I believed him. My laptop would have been in my bag on the chair by the door. My credentials were saved in the browser because Daniel had watched me type my password once and said, "You should save that, babe. You log in too many times a day to type it every time." I'd thought it was a small kindness, a man who paid attention. I looked at Howard. These logins weren't me. "The credentials are yours, Kayla." "Someone used my credentials while I was asleep. Howard, you know me. You know I would never—" "My hands are tied." He closed the folder. "Security has revoked your access. I need your badge, your laptop, and your building key. You'll be contacted by the investigation team within 5 business days." He paused. For a half-second, something flickered behind his glasses. Not guilt, exactly. Something adjacent to it. Then it was gone. "I'm sorry, Kayla, I really am." I handed over my badge, the one with the worn corner, 6 years of swiping reduced to a piece of plastic in a manila envelope. I walked back through the lobby with Howard beside me like an escort, and Gerald the security guard wouldn't look at me. Nobody would look at me. The people I'd worked beside for years suddenly found their shoes fascinating, their phones urgent, the ceiling tiles worthy of deep study. I stepped outside into the October air and stood on the sidewalk and understood, with a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins, that those access logs were fabricated. Someone had used my credentials from a device that wasn't mine, from a location that wasn't my home, on nights when my laptop was within arm's reach of a man who had 2 years to learn my habits, my passwords, my routines, my trust. Daniel didn't just cheat on me. He used me as a key to a locked door, and now he was framing me for opening it. I sat in my car in the Meridian parking garage and made 3 phone calls. The first was to my bank. The joint investment account Daniel and I had opened 9 months ago, the one where I'd deposited my savings as a gesture of trust, was frozen. Not closed, frozen. His name was the primary account holder. Mine was secondary. I had no access. The second call was to the credit card company. The supplementary card Daniel had given me, the one he'd insisted I carry for emergencies and nice things, Kayla, you deserve nice things, was canceled, terminated as of yesterday. The third call was to the property management office for my apartment in Brookline. My apartment. Except it wasn't. The lease was held by Moretti Properties, LLC. Daniel owned the building. I'd known this when I moved in. He'd said it was convenient, romantic even, that he could take care of the lease, and I could just focus on making it feel like home. I'd thought it was generous. It was a leash. The property manager informed me, with the detached politeness of someone reading from a legal notice, that my occupancy agreement would be terminated in 30 days. Mr. Moretti's office has requested the unit be vacated by November 15th. In 24 hours, I had lost my fiancé, my sister, my job, my savings, my credit card, and my home. Each one removed with surgical precision, like organs being harvested from a body that was still breathing. I called my parents from the parking garage. I don't know why. Hope, maybe. Muscle memory. The desperate, childish belief that when everything falls apart, your mother and father will catch you. My father answered on the second ring. "Kayla." His voice was already armored. "Dad, something terrible is happening. Daniel, Vanessa told us." He cut me off, not gently, like he was closing a door. "She told us about the scene you made at the house yesterday. Kayla, you threw things at Daniel's car. You screamed at Vanessa in front of the neighbors. This is not how we raised you." I hadn't thrown anything. I hadn't screamed. I'd stood on a sidewalk holding a coffee cup and watched my life drive away in a Cadillac. "Dad, that's not what happened. Vanessa is lying. Daniel has been nothing but good to this family." My father's voice hardened, the voice he used when a conversation was over and he was just waiting for the other person to realize it. "He's helped Vanessa's business. He's been generous with your mother and me. And you're going to stand there and tell me the man who gave you a $2 million ring is the villain? Kayla, you need to get control of yourself." I heard my mother in the background. Not her words, just her tone. The soft murmuring she did when she agreed with my father but didn't want to say it out loud. She'd been doing that my entire life, letting Richard Bennett speak for both of them, letting his certainty become hers. "Dad, please listen to me. I've listened enough. Vanessa is upset. Daniel is upset. Your mother is upset. For once in your life, think about someone other than yourself." The line went dead. I sat in the parking garage with the engine off and the windows up, and I breathed, slowly, in and out. The way I'd taught myself to breathe when I was 14, and Vanessa told the entire 8th grade that I'd wet the bed at summer camp, which wasn't true, but truth had never been the point with Vanessa. The point was always to make me smaller. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, 6 words on the screen. "They're not done with you yet. Be careful." I stared at the message for a long time. The number was unfamiliar. The area code was local, 617, Boston. Someone who knew what was happening. Someone who knew more was coming. Someone who, for reasons I couldn't understand, wanted me to be ready. I screenshot the message, saved it to my phone, and drove to the only place I had left to go. Megan Torres opened her apartment door in Scrubs and immediately knew. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She looked at my face and stepped aside and said, "Guest room's yours for as long as you need it. I'll put the kettle on." That's Megan. We'd been friends since freshman year at MIT, back when I still had the scholarship before I gave it up for Vanessa. Megan stayed, got her degree, went to nursing school, became an ER nurse at Mass General. She was the kind of person who could hold a bleeding stranger's hand at 3 a.m. and still show up for brunch on Sunday with a smile that hadn't dimmed. She was also the only person in my life who had never once asked me to be less than I was. I told her everything, from the Cadillac to the dress to the earrings to the access logs to the frozen accounts to my father's voice on the phone. Megan listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Kayla, this isn't a breakup, this is an operation. Someone planned this." "I know. What are you going to do?" I opened my laptop on her kitchen table. What I do best. Find the cracks. I started that night, not with emotion, with methodology. The same approach I used at Meridian when analyzing a potential breach. Identify the intrusion point, map the timeline, follow the data. The access logs. Howard showed me listed timestamps across 8 months. I pulled up my personal calendar, cross-referencing every flagged date with my own records. Every single unauthorized login occurred on a night I spent at Daniel's penthouse. Not one exception. Whoever accessed the system used my credentials from a device that connected through an IP address I didn't recognize, but the connection was routed through a VPN configured to appear as if it originated from a device registered to my home network. Someone had cloned my network signature. That required technical knowledge, serious technical knowledge. Not Daniel's level. He was a deal maker, a money man, a face. He didn't build systems. He bought people who did, which meant someone with genuine cybersecurity skills had configured this setup. Someone who understood Meridian's internal network architecture well enough to spoof a connection that fooled the security team's automated monitoring. Someone inside the company. I thought about my team, the people I'd worked with daily on Project Sentinel, 6 engineers, 2 analysts, 1 project coordinator. I trusted all of them. But trust was the currency that had bankrupted me this week, so I set it aside and looked at the data instead. One name kept surfacing in my memory, not because of what he'd done, but because of what he'd stopped doing. Marcus Webb, 36 years old, mid-level systems engineer. He'd been on my team for 3 years. Good work, not exceptional. Quiet. Kept to himself. He and I used to grab lunch together once a week, not because we were close friends, but because we were both the kind of people who ate at their desks and occasionally felt guilty about it. 3 weeks ago, Marcus stopped eating lunch with me. He stopped making eye contact in meetings. He started leaving early, something he'd never done in 3 years. And 2 months ago, at a team happy hour at a bar in the seaport, Marcus asked me a question that I'd laughed off at the time but now replayed in my head like a siren. "Hey Kayla, random question. For that presentation I'm putting together on internal architecture, can you walk me through how the Sentinel encryption layers interface with the external access protocols?" I'd explained it, casually, between sips of a gin and tonic, because he was a colleague and it was a reasonable question and I had no reason to guard the answer. Except now, sitting at Megan's kitchen table with my career in ruins, I realized Marcus had never given that presentation. I'd checked the internal share drive twice in the following weeks, and there was nothing. He'd asked for classified architectural details for a presentation that didn't exist. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed someone outside the system. Someone who could dig into the financial and personal connections I couldn't access from a laptop in my friend's guest room. I needed a private investigator. Megan knew someone. Her uncle's former partner on the Boston police force, a man named Frank DeLuca, 58 years old, retired from the force after 30 years, the last 12 in the financial crimes unit. Now he worked private cases out of a one-room office in Dorchester above a dry cleaner. I called him. His voice was gravel and black coffee. I gave him the short version. He was quiet for 10 seconds after I finished, which I would learn was Frank's way of deciding whether you were worth his time. "Ms. Bennett, if your target is Daniel Moretti, you need to understand something. I've seen his name come across desks for years. Never enough to stick, but always enough to notice. The man doesn't leave fingerprints. He leaves other people's fingerprints." "I know. He left mine." Another pause. "Come to my office tomorrow. Bring everything you have. And Ms. Bennett, if this goes where I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. Probably a lot worse." "I don't have anything left to lose, Mr. DeLuca." Yeah, that's what people always say right before they find out they do. That evening I drove to Newton. I didn't plan to. I was on my way to pick up takeout from the Thai place on Washington Street, and I found myself turning onto my parents' block without deciding to. Muscle memory or masochism, I couldn't tell the difference. I slowed as I passed the house. A colonial with white trim, the lawn still green despite October, the American flag hanging limp on the porch. The house where I learned to ride a bike, where I practiced piano scales until my fingers ached, where I sat at the kids' table at Thanksgiving until I was 26 because Vanessa's friends needed the chairs at the adult table, and someone had to make room and it was always me. Daniel's Cadillac was parked in the driveway, the same Cadillac, in my parents' driveway like it had been there 100 times. I stopped the car across the street and looked through the dining room window. The chandelier was on, the one my mother saved for holidays and special occasions. Through the glass I could see them. My mother at the head of the table setting down a serving dish. My father at the other end pouring wine. Vanessa on one side laughing at something, her hand on Daniel's arm. Daniel beside her, leaning back in his chair with the ease of a man who has never been refused entry to any room. They were having dinner. A family dinner. 4 days after Vanessa stole my fiancé, 3 days after my parents told me to get control of myself, my family was sitting around the dining room table with the man who was systematically destroying my life, and they were eating pot roast under the good chandelier. Vanessa was sitting in my chair, the one on the left side, closest to the kitchen, the seat I'd occupied at every family meal for as long as I could remember. She was sitting in it with her back straight and her wine glass raised, and my mother was smiling at her, and my father was carving meat, and Daniel Moretti was watching all of it with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has purchased exactly what he wanted. I sat in my car across the street and watched my family replace me over pot roast. They didn't draw the curtains. They didn't think they needed to, because in their minds, I was already gone. I was already the version of the story Vanessa had told them, the hysterical little sister who made a scene and needed to be managed. They'd closed ranks so fast it was like I'd never been inside them. I put the car in drive and pulled away. I didn't cry. I drove back to Megan's apartment, heated up leftover soup, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and Frank DeLuca's number in my phone, and the anonymous text message glowing on the screen beside me. "They're not done with you yet. Be careful." No, they weren't done with me. But I wasn't done either. Not even close. Frank DeLuca's office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. He'd been working my case for 4 days, and when I walked in that Thursday morning, there were 3 folders on his desk instead of the usual one. He didn't greet me. He just pointed at the chair across from him and slid the first folder over. "Sit down, Ms. Bennett. We've got a lot to cover and none of it's going to make you feel better." Inside the first folder were photographs. Vanessa and Daniel at a restaurant in the back bay, her hand on his knee under the table, his mouth close to her ear. A hotel receipt from the Four Seasons dated 14 months ago, charged to a corporate card under Moretti Holdings. Flight manifests showing Vanessa and Daniel on the same private jet to Miami, to Aspen, to the Bahamas, going back 18 months. 18 months. Vanessa had been sleeping with my fiancé for a year and a half, 6 months longer than I'd even known Daniel existed in any romantic sense. She wasn't the woman who stole my fiancé. She was the woman who had him first. "The affair's the surface," Frank said, watching me flip through the photos with hands I forced to stay steady. "It's ugly, but it's not the story. The story is in folder 2. I opened it. Financial records, corporate filings, employment history. Vanessa Bennett had worked as a financial assistant at Moretti Capital, Daniel's private investment fund, for 11 months. She started 3 years ago. She left the position 14 months ago, right around the time the hotel receipts began. On paper, she'd been a low-level employee who moved on to start her own interior design business, Bennett and Bloom Interiors. In reality, the timeline told a different story. Vanessa was inside Daniel's organization for nearly a year before the affair began. She had access to his files, his contacts, his strategy, and her interior design company, the one my parents were so proud of, the one I'd co-signed a loan for, was funded by a $500,000 investment from the Moretti Foundation that Frank traced through a shell company called Beacon Row Holdings. "She didn't just work for him," I said. "She was recruited." "That's my read," Frank said. "Moretti doesn't hire assistants through normal channels. He headhunts. He finds people with access to things he wants and brings them inside his operation. Your sister had access to something very valuable." "Me. You." Frank opened the third folder, and I felt the ground shift under my chair. "This is where it gets bad, Ms. Bennett. Moretti didn't start with you." Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, and a printed LinkedIn profile. Dr. Natalie Chen, 38 years old, former senior systems engineer at Harman Dynamics, a defense contractor based in Arlington, Virginia. 4 years ago, Natalie was terminated after an internal investigation found evidence of unauthorized access to classified project files. The access logs showed her credentials being used during off hours from locations inconsistent with her home address. She was fired, her security clearance was revoked, and her professional reputation was destroyed. She fought it for 8 months, filed appeals, hired lawyers, but the evidence was ironclad and no one believed her. She moved to Baltimore, took a job at a fraction of her former salary, and disappeared from the defense industry entirely. The pattern was identical: the off-hours access logs, the credentials used from a spoofed location, the swift termination, the destroyed career, the isolation. Same method, same result, same architect. "How did you find her?" I asked. Moretti's legal counsel on the Natalie Chen situation was a firm called Hale & Associates. Lead attorney Victor Hale. Same Victor Hale who currently represents Daniel Moretti on all his domestic legal matters. Same Victor Hale whose firm sent you the letter demanding the engagement ring back. Frank leaned forward. "Ms. Bennett, Moretti has a playbook. He targets women with security clearance at defense contractors. He gets close to them through romantic relationships. He extracts what he needs. And when they're used up, he frames them for the breach and moves on. You're not his first target. You're his second, at least." The room felt very small. I looked at Natalie Chen's LinkedIn photo. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a professional smile that didn't quite reach the corners of her mouth. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that settles into your bones when no one believes you for long enough. "I need to talk to her," I said. "Already found her address. She's in Baltimore. Small apartment in Fells Point." Frank paused. "But Kayla, I need to warn you. When I called her to ask about Moretti, she hung up on me. Called back 20 minutes later and said she'd talk, but only in person, and only if I could prove I wasn't working for him. She's scared. 4 years later, she's still scared." "I'll drive to Baltimore tomorrow." "One more thing." Frank's voice dropped. "Last night I got a call from a contact at Meridian. Off the record. Your suspension didn't originate internally. The investigation into your access logs was initiated after an outside request. Someone contacted Meridian's legal department and recommended they audit your credentials specifically. The request came through a law firm. Hale & Associates. Hale & Associates. My phone rang as I was leaving Frank's office. The caller ID said Meridian Defense. I answered expecting HR or the investigation team. Instead, I heard a voice I knew well. Howard Langford, my supervisor. The man who'd taken my badge and walked me out of the building. But his tone was different now. Lower, faster. Like a man speaking into a phone he didn't want anyone to see him holding. "Kayla, I can't talk long. I need you to listen." "Howard. The investigation into your access logs. It didn't come from security. It didn't come from our team. Someone outside the company made a formal request to our legal department, and legal ordered the audit. I was told to initiate the suspension. I pushed back. I told them your record was impeccable. They said it didn't matter. The request came with documentation that made it impossible to ignore." "Who made the request?" "I can't say that on the phone. All I can tell you is that I was given a letter to sign, a recommendation for immediate suspension based on the audit findings. I didn't write it. I didn't investigate it. I was handed a finished document and told to sign it and deliver the news." "Howard, you could have warned me." Silence. Then, "I have a family, Kayla, a mortgage, 2 kids in college." When the letter landed on my desk, it came with an implication. Not a threat, an implication. The kind that doesn't need to be said out loud. He paused. "I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than you know. But I can't do more than this." The line went dead. I sat in my car outside Frank's office and replayed his words. Howard hadn't just been pressured. He'd been afraid. And whatever scared a man who'd spent 30 years in defense contracting was bigger than a jealous ex-fiancé settling a personal score. This was institutional. This was organized. And whoever was pulling the strings had enough power to reach inside a classified defense contractor and rearrange the furniture without leaving a mark. The next morning I drove to Baltimore. 3.5 hours on I-95 with nothing but my thoughts and a thermos of gas station coffee. I replayed everything. The charity gala where Vanessa introduced me to Daniel. The 20 minutes she disappeared. The 2 years of pursuit. The flowers, the letters, the weekend trips. The proposal, the access logs, the framing, Howard's phone call. Every piece fit together like a circuit board. Each connection deliberate, each pathway designed to carry information in one direction, from me to Daniel, and to carry blame in the other direction, from Daniel to me. Natalie Chen lived in a third-floor walk-up in Fells Point, a neighborhood of cobblestone streets and brick row houses that smelled like the harbor. She opened the door on the chain and looked at me through the gap for a full 10 seconds before letting me in. She was thinner than her LinkedIn photo. Her apartment was clean but sparse, the kind of space that belongs to someone who stopped decorating because they stopped planning to stay. We sat at her kitchen table and she poured me water from a filtered pitcher and didn't speak until I did. I told her everything. The Cadillac, the dress, the access logs, Frank's findings, the identical pattern. She listened without expression, her hands wrapped around her water glass. And when I finished, she closed her eyes for a moment and breathed out through her nose like she was deflating. 4 years, she said. 4 years I've been telling myself it was over, that I'd moved on, and here you are sitting at my kitchen table telling me it's still happening. She opened her eyes. His name was David when I knew him. David Moran. That's the name he used. Charming, persistent, made me feel like I was the center of the universe. We dated for a year. He proposed after 8 months. I said yes. She paused. Same playbook? Same playbook, I said. He destroyed my life and no one believed me, Natalie said, her voice flat, factual, like she was reading a weather report about a hurricane that had already passed. They said I was paranoid. My family pulled away. My friends got tired of hearing about it. My lawyer told me to take a settlement and move on because fighting it would cost more than I'd ever recover. So I moved on, moved here, got a job doing IT consulting for a company that makes dental software. I went from protecting military communications to debugging appointment schedulers. She looked at me. What do you want from me, Kayla? Everything you have, emails, documents, notes, anything you saved from when it happened. I saved everything, she said. She stood and went to her bedroom closet. Came back with a cardboard box, the kind you buy at an office supply store, taped shut with packing tape that had yellowed with age. I kept it because I knew someone else would show up eventually. I just didn't think it would take 4 years. We spent 2 hours going through the box. Printed emails between David Moran and a law firm, Hale and Associates. The language was clinical, corporate. Asset management, liability containment, separation protocol. Natalie was never referred to by name. She was the subject, or NC. In one email from Victor Hale to Daniel's office, dated 4 years ago, the line read, "Subject has been neutralized. Recommend standard separation protocol. No further engagement necessary." Neutralized. Like she was a threat that had been diffused, like she was a malfunction in a system that needed to be patched and forgotten. I was reading my own future in the language of Natalie's past. Somewhere in Daniel's files, there was probably an email that said the same thing about me. Subject KB, neutralized. Standard separation protocol. Move on to the next one. As I was putting the last of the documents back into the box, Natalie grabbed my wrist. Her grip was stronger than I expected. Kayla, there's something I never told anyone. The night before I was fired, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken except my work laptop and my phone. And there was a note on my kitchen counter. Just one sentence. Walk away and this ends. Did you call the police? Who was going to believe me? I was already the unstable ex-girlfriend who couldn't accept a breakup. That's the story they'd built. By the time they were done, even I started wondering if maybe I was crazy. She let go of my wrist. Be careful, Kayla. Daniel doesn't just ruin lives. He erases people. And when he's done with you, the world forgets you ever existed. I drove back to Boston with Natalie's box on the passenger seat and her words in my ears. He erases people. Not ruins. Erases. Like pencil marks on paper. Like you were never there at all. 3 days after Marcus Webb confessed to me in the Cambridge Cafe, I was sitting at Megan's kitchen table at 6 in the morning, organizing everything I had into a timeline on my laptop, when my burner phone buzzed. Same unknown number as the anonymous message from my first day of exile. This time, the message was longer. Check the Moretti Foundation donor list. Your parents' names are on it. They knew before you did. All of them. I stared at the screen. Whoever was sending these messages knew about my parents specifically. Not just that they'd sided with Vanessa. Not just that they'd taken Daniel's calls. They knew about financial connections between the Moretti Foundation and my family. This wasn't a random whistleblower with a guilty conscience. This was someone with direct access to Daniel's financial operations, who also knew the details of my family relationships. The intersection of those two circles was very small. I tried tracing the message. 3 VPN layers, professionally masked, rotating IP addresses. Whoever built this routing knew what they were doing or had hired someone who did. I saved the metadata for analysis and called Frank. He called back at 7. His voice was different. The gravel was still there, but something heavier sat underneath it. Kayla, come to my office. Not over the phone. I drove to Dorchester. Frank slid a folder across his desk, and I was starting to understand that Frank communicated bad news the way other people communicated weather. Matter-of-factly, without cushioning, because cushioning wasted time that could be spent doing something about it. Inside the folder were financial records from the Moretti Foundation's public filings, cross-referenced with corporate registration documents Frank had pulled through his contacts. A $500,000 payment from the Moretti Foundation, routed through Beacon Row Holdings, deposited into the operating account of Bennett and Bloom Interiors, Vanessa's company, 6 months before Daniel proposed to me. The investment predates the proposal, Frank said. That means the arrangement between Daniel and your family was locked in before he ever put a ring on your finger. The proposal wasn't the start of anything. It was a milestone in something that had been running for months. My parents knew. Before the ring. Before the gala. Before Daniel kissed me for the first time and told me I was extraordinary. My parents knew he was coming for me, and they took his money and set the table and watched. I drove to Newton without calling ahead. The colonial with the white trim and the American flag looked the same as it always did. Neat and composed. A house that performed stability for the neighbors. My father opened the door, surprised. My mother was in the kitchen. The house smelled like pot roast. Vanessa's favorite, never mine. I walked past my father into the hallway and stopped. On the hallway table, in a silver frame I'd never noticed before, was a photograph of Vanessa and Daniel at what looked like a Moretti Foundation event. Black tie, her arm through his, both smiling. Vanessa's hair was shorter in the photo, the bob she'd worn last year before she grew it out. This photo was at least a year old. It had been sitting on my parents' hallway table, openly displayed for months. I had walked past it every time I visited this house during my engagement to Daniel. I'd walked past a photograph of my fiancé with my sister, and never looked closely enough to see it because it never occurred to me that I needed to. I placed Frank's financial documents on the kitchen table. $500,000, Mom. From Daniel's foundation, into Vanessa's company, 6 months before he proposed to me. My mother's hands froze on the dish towel she was holding. My father came in from the hallway, saw the papers, and his jaw tightened the way it always did when reality contradicted the story he preferred. The confrontation lasted 12 minutes. I know because I checked the clock afterward. 12 minutes to dismantle 32 years of illusion. My mother cried, but she did not deny. She called it an investment, not a bribe. She said Daniel believed in Vanessa's potential. She said I was twisting everything because I was hurt. My father was harder, louder, the way he always got when he felt cornered. Daniel brought more to this family in 1 year than you have in 32. He gave Vanessa a chance. He gave us stability. What have you ever given us, Kayla? Bills, worry, a daughter who was always too busy with her computers to pick up the phone. I absorbed it. I'd heard versions of this my whole life. That I wasn't enough. That Vanessa needed more. That the family's needs outweighed mine. But this time there was arithmetic attached. This time I could put a dollar figure on my own erasure. $500,000. That's what my family cost. That's the price they accepted to stay quiet while a man dismantled their youngest daughter's life from the inside. I asked one question. Did you know Daniel was using me to access classified defense projects? My father hesitated. 1 second, maybe 2. But I'm trained to notice gaps in systems, and a 2-second pause from Richard Bennett was a canyon. My mother looked at the floor. Neither answered directly. My father said, "We didn't ask questions. Daniel said he needed you close to certain business interests. We assumed it was networking." You assumed? You didn't ask, because you didn't care what happened to me as long as the money kept flowing into Vanessa's company. The front door opened. Vanessa walked in carrying a shopping bag and wearing sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. She had a key. She came and went freely. This was still her house in every way that mattered, and it had never been mine. She saw me, saw the documents on the table, saw our mother crying and our father red-faced. She set her bag down on the counter, poured herself a glass of water from the Brita filter, took a sip and said, "You've always lived for me, Kayla. You should be used to it by now. If anything, you should be grateful. I gave your life a purpose." The words landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. My mother flinched. My father looked away. And Vanessa stood there drinking water in our mother's kitchen with the same expression she'd worn in the Cadillac. The same expression she'd worn at the dress fitting when she zipped me up and told me I was beautiful. Serene, certain, untouchable. She genuinely believed it. She had rewritten the history of our family so completely that she saw herself as the sun and me as a moon that existed only to reflect her light. And the silence from both my parents confirmed that they'd been reading the same script. I stood up. I looked at all three of them. My mother clutching a dish towel and crying tears that were for herself, not for me. My father rigid with the self-righteousness of a man who has never once admitted he was wrong. My sister drinking water like this was a Tuesday. "I spent my whole life thinking I wasn't enough for this family," I said. "Turns out I was worth exactly $500,000 to you. Now I know the price, and you're going to wish it was higher." I walked out of that house, and I did not look back. I did not close the door gently. That evening, I met Marcus Webb at the Cambridge Cafe. He looked worse than the last time. Dark circles that looked like bruises, weight loss visible in his neck and wrists, a tremor in his hands when he lifted his coffee cup. He'd been sleeping in his car for 2 nights because he was afraid to go home. He handed me the notarized statement, 8 pages, confirming he'd created the fake access logs under Daniel's coercion. But he wasn't done. He'd been carrying something heavier, and I watched him work up to it the way you watch someone approach the edge of a diving board. "Kayla, when Daniel first contacted me, it wasn't a phone call. It wasn't an email. It was your sister." I set my coffee down. "Vanessa came to a company happy hour about 18 months ago. I didn't know who she was. She was friendly, flirtatious. She knew about my gambling debt, details she couldn't have known unless she had access to background check records or internal HR files. She knew the amount. She knew the creditors. She talked about it casually, like it was something everybody knew, and when I panicked, she told me she knew someone who could make it go away." Marcus's hands trembled. "She introduced me to Daniel 2 weeks later at a private dinner. Daniel offered to clear the full $200,000 in exchange for what he called small favors. I thought it meant data entry or moving some files around. It escalated. Marcus, who else is involved?" He looked at me and I saw something beyond fear. I saw a man standing at the edge of a truth he couldn't take back. "There's someone else inside Meridian, someone higher than me. I never met them directly, but Daniel mentioned them once. He called them Gatekeeper. Said Gatekeeper had been feeding information for over 2 years. Before me. Before you were even engaged." The word settled into the air between us like smoke. Gatekeeper. Someone senior. Someone with clearance above mine. Someone who'd been operating inside Meridian Defense for 2 years without triggering a single alarm. And Daniel trusted this person more than anyone else in his network. More than Vanessa. More than Marcus. "Do you know who it is?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "All I know is Daniel talked about Gatekeeper like they were untouchable. Like even if everything else fell apart, Gatekeeper would keep the pipeline open." I told Marcus to go to the motel in New Hampshire. I gave him cash and the address Frank had arranged. I told him not to contact anyone except me or Frank. "And Marcus, if you disappear on me, I can't protect you. Do you understand?" He nodded, took the cash, left through the back door. I returned to Megan's apartment at 10 that night. The street was quiet, the kind of early autumn quiet that feels like the city is holding its breath. I parked and walked toward the building entrance and stopped. A black sedan sat 50 yards down the block. Engine off, lights off. But through the tinted windshield, I could see the faint glow of a phone screen illuminating someone's face. I walked past it without looking directly at it. Memorized the plate number. Went inside. Megan was in the kitchen, standing by the counter with her phone in her hand, and an expression I hadn't seen on her face since the night she told me about her mother's cancer diagnosis. "Kayla, I didn't want to scare you, but that car has been there for 3 nights. And yesterday someone called the front desk at Mass General and asked which shifts I work. They said it was for a legal matter, but they didn't give a name or a firm." I looked through the window. The sedan hadn't moved. Whoever was inside was patient and professional and had been surveilling Megan's apartment long enough to establish a pattern. This wasn't about watching me. They were mapping everyone around me. Megan's schedule, Megan's workplace, Megan's vulnerabilities. She was being profiled, not because she'd done anything, but because she was the last person standing next to me. I photographed the car from the window using a telephoto lens Megan's ex had left behind, ran the plate through a public records database, and hit a dead end. Rental car. Enterprise location in Cambridge. Probably paid with a corporate card that led to a shell company that led to nothing. I sent the plate number to Frank. Then I sat with Megan in the dark living room, blinds drawn, and she said what I'd been dreading. "I'm not going to tell you to stop, but I need you to know that I'm scared." I took her hand. "You're the only person who believed me from the beginning. I won't let them touch you." "I know," she said, "that's what scares me, that you'd put yourself between me and a bullet." We sat in the dark and listened to the city breathe outside the closed blinds, and neither of us said what we were both thinking, that the circle of safety around me was shrinking every day and the people still standing inside it were running out of room. After Megan went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at my laptop screen until the connection stopped swimming and started forming shapes. Frank's financial trail, Marcus's confession, Natalie's box of evidence, the anonymous messages, the surveillance car, Howard's terrified phone call, and the word that sat at the center of everything like a spider in a web. Gatekeeper. Someone senior at Meridian Defense. Someone with level 4 clearance or above. Someone who'd been there longer than me, longer than my engagement, longer than Daniel's interest in Meridian's encryption technology. Someone invisible. I pulled up the Meridian internal directory from memory and started a list of names. Level 4 clearance holders, 6 people in the entire company. I was one. The CTO, the CEO, 2 division directors, and Howard Langford. My phone buzzed. "Marcus, sent 2 minutes ago." "I'm at the motel. I'm safe." "But Kayla, I forgot to tell you something. The hard drive I copied from Daniel's office. I still have it. I was too scared to mention it today. It has everything. Emails, names, dates. Gatekeeper's real identity. I think it's someone you know." I read the message 3 times. Then I closed my eyes and pressed my forehead against the cool surface of the kitchen table and let the weight of it settle over me. Someone I knew. Someone I'd worked beside, eaten lunch with, trusted with my career and my safety and my future. Someone who smiled at me every day while selling me to the man who was dismantling my life. 4 days ago, I had lost everything. Tonight I was closer to the truth than I'd ever been. And the truth I was beginning to understand was going to hurt worse than the lies. I called the FBI field office in Boston at 8:12 in the morning from a burner phone I'd bought at a CVS in Somerville. I asked for the counterintelligence division. The woman who answered transferred me twice, put me on hold for 6 minutes, and I almost hung up because the hold music was a tinny rendition of something classical that sounded like it was being played through a paper towel tube. Then a voice came on. Clear, direct, no filler. Special Agent Rachel Dominguez, Counterintelligence Division. I gave her the compressed version. Senior cybersecurity engineer at a defense contractor, framed for a data breach by my ex-fiancé, a billionaire real estate developer. Evidence of a larger espionage operation targeting multiple defense firms over at least 4 years. A cooperating witness, financial records, a pattern. Rachel listened without interrupting, which I would learn was her signature. Most people fill silence with noise. Rachel Dominguez filled it with attention. When I finished, she said, "Ms. Bennett, can you come in today?" "Not tomorrow, today." I said yes, and was at the FBI Boston field office on Center Plaza by 10:30. Rachel Dominguez was late 40s, lean, with dark hair pulled back tight, and eyes that moved like security cameras, smooth, constant, missing nothing. She led me through 2 security checkpoints and down a hallway that smelled like recycled air and institutional carpet, into a conference room with no windows and a table that could seat 8, but held only 2 chairs. She placed a digital recorder between us and sat down. "Before you start, I want you to know something. You're not the first person to walk in here about Daniel Moretti." My stomach dropped and rose at the same time. The FBI already knew his name. I wasn't bringing them news. I was confirming something they'd been watching from a distance, trying to build a case around for months. "How long?" I asked. "I can't give you specifics, but approximately 8 months. Suspected economic espionage, money laundering through real estate holdings, improper access to defense technology through civilian contractors." She paused. "We have fragments, financial anomalies, suspicious connections between Moretti's companies and foreign intermediaries. But we don't have an inside witness. We don't have hard evidence from within the target companies. Everything we have is circumstantial, and circumstantial doesn't get arrest warrants for a man with Daniel Moretti's legal resources." I opened my bag and laid it out. Marcus Webb's notarized confession about the fabricated access logs. Frank DeLuca's financial trail connecting the Moretti Foundation to my parents' and Vanessa's company through Beacon Row Holdings. The documents from Natalie Chen's box, including Victor Hale's emails about subject neutralization and separation protocol. The pattern, 2 women, 2 defense contractors, identical methods, identical outcomes. And the name. There's someone inside Meridian Defense, a mole. Daniel calls them gatekeeper. They've been operating for at least 2 years, possibly longer. Rachel's expression shifted when I said the word. It was small, controlled, the kind of micro-reaction that most people wouldn't catch. But I'd spent 10 years reading systems for anomalies, and a human face is just another system. She'd heard the name before. The FBI knew Gatekeeper existed but couldn't identify who was behind it. I was the missing variable. "Mrs. Bennett," Rachel said, after reviewing the documents for several minutes, "what you're describing could be the break we've been waiting for. But I have to be transparent. If you cooperate formally, if you become a federal witness, Daniel Moretti will know, his legal team will know, and based on what we've observed, his response to perceived threats is aggressive and immediate." "He already took my job, my home, my family, and my fiancé," I said. "What's left to lose?" Rachel looked at me steadily. "Your safety, and the safety of the people around you." I thought about Megan, the black sedan outside her apartment, the calls to her hospital. "I understand the risk," I said. "I'm not asking you to protect me from it. I'm asking you to use what I'm giving you before he does it to someone else." I was leaving the FBI building, walking down the front steps into the midday sun, when Megan called. Her voice was tight, controlled the way it gets when she's managing a crisis in the ER and can't afford to panic. "Kayla, have you seen the news?" I pulled out my phone. A Boston Globe feature article, posted 2 hours ago. The headline hit me like a fist wrapped in newsprint. Former defense contractor employee under investigation for data breach claims billionaire ex-fiancé framed her. Sources say otherwise. I stood on the sidewalk and read it. The article was a demolition job disguised as journalism. Anonymous sources close to the Moretti family described me as obsessive, unable to accept the end of the relationship, increasingly erratic since the engagement ended. The writer quoted a family member who asked not to be named, saying I had a history of emotional volatility. And then, buried in the fourth paragraph like a knife slipped between ribs, a detail that made my vision blur. The article mentioned that I had been prescribed anxiety medication, implying a pattern of mental instability. My anxiety medication. The bottles that vanished from my bathroom cabinet when the house was surgically emptied in October. Someone hadn't just taken them to destabilize me. They'd taken the prescription labels, the pharmacy information, the dosage records, and fed them to a reporter as evidence that I was falling apart. The theft wasn't petty. It was ammunition. The article quoted Vanessa directly. My sister needs professional help. I love her, but she's been spiraling since the engagement ended. I'm worried about her safety, and honestly about the safety of people around her. The concerned sister performance, pitch perfect. Vanessa sounded caring, not cruel. Worried, not vindictive. A reader scrolling through the Globe on their lunch break would see a troubled young woman and a compassionate older sister trying to help. They wouldn't see the Cadillac, they wouldn't see the wedding dress, they wouldn't see the pearl earrings or the $500,000, or the email that said, "Subject has been neutralized." I scrolled through the comments because I am a human being, and human beings do stupid things when they're hurt. Most of them sided with Vanessa. This poor woman needs therapy, not a lawsuit. Another gold digger mad she got dumped by a billionaire. The sister sounds like a saint for putting up with this. Classic scorned woman syndrome. Each comment was a small incision. I closed the phone. I did not read anymore. The professional fallout came fast. Megan called again an hour later. Mass General Hospital had received 3 anonymous phone calls that morning. The first accused Megan of harboring a person under federal investigation and demanded to know if the hospital condoned such behavior from its nursing staff. The second requested Megan's shift schedule for a legal matter, but refused to provide a name or firm. The third was the simplest and the worst. A man's voice, calm, unhurried. Tell your friend to stop before someone gets hurt. Megan's supervisor had called her in and told her, with the discomfort of a man who didn't want to be involved, that she needed to sort out her personal life before it affected the department. Megan was holding. But holding has a shelf life. I called Frank. They're going after Megan now. They're cutting your support network, Frank said, his voice flat with recognition. Standard playbook for people with Moretti's resources. Isolate the target, remove every ally, make it so expensive and painful to stand next to you that everyone steps away. Then they crush you alone. How do I stop it? You move faster than they expect. I drove to Baltimore the next morning. Not just to warn Natalie that the FBI investigation was accelerating and her name might surface publicly. I needed her files again, her old emails, her contacts, anything from 4 years ago that might connect to what was happening now. Natalie opened the door looking like she hadn't slept since my last visit. She'd seen the Globe article. "It's happening again," she said. She didn't mean to me, she meant to herself. Watching my story in the news had pulled the stitches out of wounds she'd spent 4 years closing. The same playbook, the media, the anonymous sources, the concerned family members. They did exactly this to me in Virginia. By the time I fought back, no one was listening anymore. Natalie retrieved the box from her closet, the same cardboard box she'd shown me before, but this time she dug deeper, pulling out a flash drive and a stack of handwritten notes she'd made during the worst months. I saved everything because I knew one day someone else would need it, she said. I just didn't think it would take 4 years. I went through the materials at her kitchen table. In the printed email chains between Daniel's office and Victor Hale's firm, I found what I was looking for. The language was clean, corporate, the kind of writing designed to say everything while admitting nothing. Asset management. Liability containment. Recommend standard separation protocol. One email from Hale to Daniel's office read, "Subject has been neutralized. No further engagement necessary. Recommend archiving all communications related to NC and transitioning focus to pipeline development." Pipeline development. That meant there was a process, a system for identifying, targeting, and discarding women. Natalie wasn't a one-time mistake. She was a product line that had been retired and replaced. Natalie grabbed my arm as I was packing the files. Her fingers pressed into my wrist hard enough that I felt her pulse against mine. "Kayla, there's one more thing. Something I never told the lawyers, never told the police, never told anyone." She let go and sat back, crossing her arms like she was holding herself together. "The night before I was fired, someone broke into my apartment. I came home and the door was unlocked. Nothing looked wrong at first. But my work laptop was gone. My phone was gone. And on the kitchen counter there was a note. White paper, printed, no handwriting. One sentence. "Walk away, and this ends." "Did you report it?" "To who?" By that point I was already the unstable ex-girlfriend, the woman who couldn't accept a breakup. That's the story they built around me, and it was airtight. Any report I filed would have been filed away as evidence of my paranoia. She paused. "Kayla, be careful. Daniel doesn't just ruin lives. He erases people. When he's done with you, the world forgets you existed." I drove back to Boston with her words filling the car like smoke. He erases people. 4 years later, Natalie Chen was alive but invisible. A ghost in a third-floor walk-up doing IT support for a dental software company. Everything she'd built, her career, her credibility, her identity, had been compressed into a single line in a lawyer's email and filed away under neutralized. That night, I tried Marcus. His number rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. I texted, "Marcus, I need confirmation you're okay. Call me." 30 minutes. Nothing. The apartment was quiet. Megan was working a night shift. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone face up on the surface, watching it not ring. I called Frank. He tried the motel directly. The front desk said Marcus checked out 6 hours ago, left in a hurry. Didn't say where he was going, didn't leave a forwarding number, just grabbed his bag and walked to his car and drove. Frank ran Marcus's credit card. Last charge was at a gas station in Concord, New Hampshire, heading north on I-93. After that, nothing. His phone was off or dead. 2 possibilities, Frank said. He panicked and bolted. Or someone found him first. He has the hard drive, Frank. I know. If Daniel's people got to him, that evidence is gone. Gatekeeper's identity is gone. Everything we need to make this case is on that drive. I know that too. Silence on the line. Kayla, we've still got Marcus's notarized statement. We've got my financial records. We've got Natalie's documents. We've got the FBI investigation. The hard drive would have been the crown jewel, but we're not dead in the water without it. We're close to dead. Close isn't dead. I sat in my car in Megan's parking lot after Frank hung up. Rain had started, light and steady, the kind that doesn't know when to stop. I watched it bead on the windshield and thought about Natalie's words. He erases people. Marcus could be erased right now, vanishing into the White Mountains with a hard drive full of evidence and a head full of fear, slowly becoming another person who tried to fight Daniel Moretti and disappeared. For the first time since the Cadillac pulled up to my gate, I considered the possibility that I might lose. That Daniel was too insulated, too connected, too lawyered up to be brought down by one woman with a laptop and a retired cop and a box of 4-year-old emails. That the FBI might be too slow, that Marcus might never surface. That my family would never believe me because believing me would cost them $500,000 and the comfort of the story they'd chosen. The doubt was real, and it was heavy, and it sat on my chest like a stone. Then I went inside, opened my laptop, and looked at the map I'd been building. Names, dates, money flows, connection lines drawn between Daniel, Vanessa, Victor Hale, Marcus, Natalie, Howard, my parents, Meridian Defense. The map was incomplete. It had holes where the hard drive should have been, where Gatekeeper's identity should have been. But it was more than Natalie ever had, more than anyone had ever assembled against Daniel Moretti. And I had something else. Something Daniel's algorithms hadn't accounted for. I knew the pattern now. I'd seen it from the inside, and from 4 years in the past, and from the wreckage of 2 women's lives. I knew how he operated, how he selected, how he approached, how he extracted, how he framed, how he erased. And patterns, once identified, can be predicted. And predictions can be weaponized. Just before midnight, my burner phone lit up. Same unknown number, longer message this time. Marcus is alive. He ran on his own. The hard drive is still with him. But you need to find him before Friday. After Friday, it won't matter. Daniel is planning to leave the country. Once he's gone, Gatekeeper disappears, and you'll never prove anything. You're running out of time. I read it 3 times, screenshotted it, sent it to Frank and Rachel simultaneously. Then, for the first time, I typed a reply. Who are you? 3 dots appeared on the screen. Someone was typing. My heart hammered against my ribs. The dots pulsed for 5 seconds. 10, 15. Then they stopped. No message came. Whoever was feeding me information had just handed me a clock. 4 days. 4 days to find Marcus, recover the hard drive, expose Gatekeeper, and bring down a man who had spent a decade erasing women like me. I didn't know if 4 days was enough, but I knew one thing with the kind of certainty that lives in your bones, not your brain. I was done waiting for someone else to save me. Wednesday morning, 2 days before the anonymous sender's Friday deadline. Frank picked me up at Megan's apartment at 6 in the morning in his 10-year-old Ford Taurus that smelled like pine air freshener and the ghost of 1,000 stakeouts. We drove north on I-93 toward New Hampshire, chasing a man who didn't want to be found with evidence that could bring down an empire. The motel in Nashua was a 2-story cinder block rectangle off Route 101A, the kind of place that charged by the night and didn't ask questions. Marcus's room had been cleaned. The front desk clerk, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, confirmed he'd left around 4 in the afternoon 2 days ago. Alone. Looked agitated. Carried a backpack and a laptop bag. Didn't say where he was going. Paid cash for his last night. Frank showed his old badge, the retired one that still opened doors when you flashed it fast enough, and the clerk let us check the room. Nothing. Sheets changed, trash emptied, minibar untouched. He'd left clean. Frank drove us to the gas station in Concord, where Marcus's last credit card charge had pinged, a Sunoco on the edge of the highway. Frank talked to the manager, showed Marcus's photo on his phone, and got access to the security footage. There he was, time-stamped 37 hours ago, alone, no one following him. He filled his tank, went inside, bought a bottle of water and a pack of cigarettes, came back out, got in his car, and drove north. His face on the footage was the face of a man running from something he couldn't see, not hurt, not restrained, terrified and free, which was almost worse because it meant the threat was in his head, and you can't outrun what's inside your own skull. Frank knew people in New Hampshire, former colleagues from the Boston PD who'd retired to the quiet towns north of Concord, guys who did private security work and kept their ears close to the ground. He made calls from the Sunoco parking lot while I sat in the passenger seat analyzing the anonymous messages on my laptop. 3 messages now. I laid them side by side and looked at the metadata. The timestamps formed a pattern I hadn't noticed before. The first message arrived within 30 minutes of my suspension from Meridian. The second arrived the morning after Marcus confessed to me at the cafe. The third arrived the night Marcus disappeared. Each message was sent within a tight window following a significant event in my case. The sender wasn't operating on a schedule. They were operating on a trigger. They were watching events unfold and responding in near real time. This person had either direct access to Daniel's communications, active surveillance on me, or both. Not a distant tipster dropping breadcrumbs. Someone inside the machine watching the gears turn, whispering through the gaps. By noon, Frank had a lead. One of his contacts, a retired detective now doing PI work in the Lakes region, had spotted a car matching Marcus's description at a budget motel in Lincoln, a small town near the White Mountains, 3 hours north. We drove. I used the time to dig deeper into the anonymous messages, trying to crack